The lawyer's voice had that particular flatness people used when delivering bad news they'd rehearsed. Mrs. Reyes, I'm afraid your ex-husband has filed for full custody. Given your current situation, the court is inclined to grant his petition. Elena Reyes sat in the legal aid office, her 7-year-old daughter Sofia pressed against her side, and felt the floor drop away beneath her feet. Not literally, just that sensation of free fall that comes when the last thing holding your life together decides to let go. My situation? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Years as an ER nurse had taught her to sound calm while chaos erupted around her. You mean being homeless? The lawyer, Ms. Chen, young enough to still believe the system worked, adjusted her glasses with the careful precision of someone buying time to arrange diplomatic phrasing. The court considers housing stability a significant factor in custody determinations. Your ex-husband has a 4-bedroom home in Bellevue. You're currently residing in a women's shelter. Sofia's hand found Elena's, small fingers squeezing with pressure that said, I'm scared, but I'm trying not to show it. Elena squeezed back, her own hand trembling despite 43 years of practice at appearing competent under pressure. I had a home, Elena said quietly, until Marco drained our joint account to pay off gambling debts I didn't know existed. Until the bank foreclosed because he hadn't paid the mortgage in 8 months while telling me everything was fine. Ms. Chen's expression softened fractionally. I believe you, Mrs. Reyes, but belief doesn't change housing court reality. Without stable residence, the judge will rule in your ex-husband's favor. You have 2 weeks. 2 weeks. 14 days to conjure an apartment from a bank account containing $847 and broken promises. 14 days before Sofia went to live with a man who'd lied about everything except his golf handicap and his ability to charm judges. Outside the legal aid office, November rain hammered Seattle with the enthusiasm of a drummer who'd just discovered rhythm. Sofia pulled her jacket, too thin for Pacific Northwest winter. Another thing Elena would fix when money magically appeared from nowhere, tighter around her shoulders. Mama, are we going to be okay? The question landed like a punch. Elena knelt on the wet sidewalk, eye level with her daughter, and did what mothers do when truth would break a child's heart. She lied. Yes, baby, we're going to be fine. Sofia nodded with the careful seriousness of children who know adults are lying, but need to believe anyway. Okay, I believe you. They walked 3 blocks to the shelter, rain soaking through Elena's secondhand coat, through her scrubs from the urgent care job that paid $16.50 an hour, exactly enough to feed them, but not enough for first, last, and security deposit anywhere in Seattle. The shelter smelled like institutional soup and too many people sharing too little space. Elena signed in at the desk, grabbed their assigned bunks, and helped Sofia with homework while other residents moved through evening routines with the quiet efficiency of people who'd learned to make invisible lives in public spaces. Elena's phone buzzed. Email notification from a law firm she didn't recognize. The subject line made her stomach clench. Estate of Beatriz Alvarez Reyes, final distribution notice. Her grandmother, Lola Beatriz, had died 6 months ago in the Philippines, and Elena hadn't been able to afford the flight for the funeral. The guilt had been eating her alive in small bites. One more thing Marco's financial destruction had stolen from her. She opened the email with fingers that suddenly didn't want to cooperate. Dear Mrs. Elena Reyes, we regret to inform you of the final distribution of assets from the estate of Beatriz Alvarez Reyes, your paternal grandmother. After settling outstanding debts and fees, you have inherited the following property. 1 parcel of agricultural land, approximately 2 hectares, located in the municipality of Anda, Pangasinan Province, Republic of the Philippines. Property consists of abandoned saffron cultivation facility. Current estimated market value, $1 due to complete operational abandonment and severe structural deterioration. Property has been unoccupied for approximately 35 years. Local municipal authorities report significant disrepair. Property taxes are 4 years delinquent at 127,000 Philippine pesos, approximately $2,270. Property will be seized by municipality if taxes remain unpaid beyond 60 days from this notice date. Please contact our office regarding transfer of title or property liquidation options. Elena read it twice, then a third time. The words didn't change. She'd inherited a frozen saffron field worth $1 in a country she hadn't visited since childhood. A field so worthless the lawyers couldn't even be bothered to write a proper appraisal. Saffron, the spice worth more than gold by weight, except when it was frozen, abandoned, and apparently falling apart in some remote Philippine province she barely remembered. Sofia looked up from her math homework, pencil paused mid-equation. "Mama? What's wrong?" "Nothing, baby." Elena closed the email, mind churning through calculations that didn't add up. "Just family stuff. From the Philippines." "From Lola Beatriz?" Elena nodded, throat tight. Sofia had only met her great-grandmother twice via video calls, but children remembered kindness across distance and time. Lola Beatriz had sung Filipino lullabies, told stories about magical fields that glowed purple at harvest, promised Sofia that someday she'd visit and see where their family came from. Now Lola was gone, and Elena had inherited $1 worth of agricultural disaster as a final gift. She lay awake that night on a narrow shelter bunk, listening to Sofia breathe beside her and the sounds of other families existing in compressed spaces. The email haunted her with specificity. 2 hectares. Abandoned saffron facility. Frozen. Her phone whispered with Google searches she shouldn't be wasting data on. And a Pangasinan, Philippines. Saffron cultivation, agricultural property value, Philippines. The information arrived in fragments. And it was coastal, remote, poor. Saffron grew from crocus flowers, harvested by hand, sold for $500 to $5,000 per pound, depending on quality. Cultivation required specific climate conditions. Freezing saffron facilities was unusual. Most operations were small-scale, family-run. But Lola Beatriz had always been unusual. Elena remembered that much from childhood visits. Her grandmother moving through the world with quiet certainty, speaking little but observing everything, making decisions that seemed strange until years later when they revealed themselves as brilliant. At 3 a.m., Elena made the calculation that would change everything. Round-trip ticket to Manila, $847. Exactly what she had in her account. Getting there would leave her with $0, no safety net, no backup plan if the property was exactly as worthless as described. But staying meant losing Sofia in 11 days. Meant watching Marco's lawyer dismantle her custody with housing court reality while she stood helpless with $847 and nowhere to go. The property was worthless. The lawyers said so. But Lola Beatriz had kept it for 35 years without selling. Had paid taxes on abandoned land while living on a pension that barely covered rice and utilities. There had to be a reason. Or Elena was about to spend her last dollar on desperate delusion because grief and panic made terrible financial advisors. She booked the tickets at 4 a.m., fingers shaking on the phone screen. Manila via Seattle-Tacoma International, departing in 48 hours. No return flight because she couldn't afford it. One way into uncertainty with a 7-year-old and no plan beyond see the property and figure something out. Ms. Chen's voice played in her memory. 2 weeks. Without stable residence. The judge will rule in your ex-husband's favor. Elena whispered to the darkness, to Lola Beatriz's ghost, to whatever forces determined whether desperate mothers got second chances or just harder falls. Please let this be something. Please. Sofia stirred in her sleep, small hand reaching out automatically to find Elena's arm. The touch was trust made physical. Belief that her mother would fix this, would find a way, would be the adult who didn't fail. Elena held her daughter's hand and prayed to a grandmother she'd never properly mourned that frozen saffron fields contained miracles instead of just one more disappointment in a year made of them. The shelter's morning routine began at 6 a.m. with buzzer that sounded like judgment. Elena woke Sofia gently, helped her dress in a bathroom they shared with 4 other families, and tried to explain the unexplainable over instant oatmeal from the communal kitchen. "We're going on a trip, baby, to the Philippines, to see Lola's house." Sofia's eyes went wide with 7-year-old processing speed that moved faster than adults expected. "Is that where you're from?" "Where I was born, yes. Before we moved to America when I was 9. Can we stay there?" The question hit harder than intended. Elena stirred her oatmeal with mechanical precision, buying seconds to formulate an answer that wasn't a lie, but wasn't quite truth either. "We're going to see. Lola left me some land. I need to figure out what to do with it." "Is it a good place?" "I don't know yet." Sofia absorbed this with the gravity of children who'd learned that uncertainty meant trouble ahead, but asking too many questions made it worse. "Okay, can I bring my books?" "You can bring 2. And clothes. Nothing else. We have to travel light." They spent the next day preparing with the organized efficiency of people who'd learned that homelessness meant keeping your entire life portable. Elena withdrew $200 from her account, enough for cab fare and maybe food at Manila Airport. The remaining $647 stayed digital because carrying cash invited theft. She called the law firm in the Philippines, connected after 4 transfers to someone named Attorney Santos, who sounded perpetually annoyed by existence itself. His English carried the formal precision of legal training mixed with regional accent. "Mrs. Reyes." "Yes, the Alvarez property. You are planning to visit?" His tone suggested this was inadvisable, bordering on insane. "I need to see it before making decisions. The property is difficult to reach. The municipality of Anda is remote. The facility has been abandoned since your grandmother departed in 1989. I must advise you that liquidation value is minimal. The structure is unsound. Local authorities have classified it as hazardous." "How hazardous?" "The primary cultivation building's roof has partially collapsed. The irrigation systems are non-functional. The access road was washed out in Typhoon Nari, 2013. Municipal authorities maintain the property should be condemned and demolished at owner expense." Elena's stomach sank. This was worse than the email suggested. Not just abandoned, actively dangerous. What about the land itself? Could someone build something new there? Attorney Santos made a sound that might have been a laugh if laughter were illegal, and he was complying reluctantly. "Mrs. Reyes, Anda is one of the poorest municipalities in Pangasinan. There is no infrastructure, no tourism, no development prospects. Coastal erosion threatens the entire area. Even if you raise the existing structure, the land itself has negligible value. Then why did my grandmother keep it?" Silence on the line. Then, quietly, "Your grandmother was unusual. She believed things others did not. I handled her legal affairs for 20 years. She refused every offer to sell, and there were several in the early years. She said the property was important. She never explained why." "Did you ever visit it?" "Once. 30 years ago, when your grandmother first hired me. It was already abandoned then. The buildings were empty except for equipment your grandmother said was too valuable to remove. She had the entire facility sealed, doors welded shut, windows barred, like she was protecting something." Elena's pulse quickened. "Protecting what?" She never said. I assumed sentimental attachment to family property. But Mrs. Reyes, whatever your grandmother believed, the reality is harsh. The property cannot be sold for meaningful sum. The demolition costs would exceed any potential sale price. You are inheriting debt and liability, not asset. I'll see it anyway. As you wish. I will arrange for local guide. The access road requires off-road vehicle. There is no accommodation nearby. You will need to complete your inspection and return to Manila same day. After hanging up, Elena sat on the shelter bunk with Sofia, coloring quietly beside her, and tried to make sense of information that refused to form coherent picture. Lola Beatriz had sealed the facility, protected something valuable enough to weld doors shut and bar windows. But if Saffron equipment was the valuable item, why not sell it 35 years ago when she needed money? Unless it wasn't the equipment. Unless something else was sealed inside that cultivation facility where purple crocus flowers once grew. Sofia's voice interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Mama, I drew Lola's house. She held up crayon drawing, square building, purple dots for flowers, stick figure woman smiling in front. Child's interpretation of place she'd never seen based on stories Elena had told. It's beautiful, baby. Do you think Lola's house misses her? The question, delivered with 7-year-old seriousness, made Elena's throat close. Maybe that's why we need to visit. To tell it she loved it. Sofia nodded, satisfied with this explanation that treated buildings as entities deserving closure. Then we should go soon, before it gets too sad. The flight departed SeaTac at 11 p.m., connecting through Tokyo. Elena had flown internationally exactly twice before, once to the Philippines for her mother's funeral. When she was 23, once to Cabo for a medical conference Marco had promised was necessary for his dental practice, but was actually a golf trip with colleagues. This time felt different. Final, like she was burning a bridge by crossing it. Sofia pressed against the airplane window during takeoff, watching Seattle's lights shrink beneath them, and Elena felt the weight of what she'd done settle onto her chest like concrete. She'd spent every dollar on a one-way ticket to see property worth $1. If this failed, when this failed, they'd be homeless in a foreign country where Elena's Tagalog was rusty from disuse, and Sofia spoke none at all. The in-flight magazine had an article about saffron cultivation in Spain. Elena read it 3 times, absorbing information that probably wouldn't help, but might. Saffron came from Crocus sativus, harvested manually, 3 stigmas per flower. Took 150 flowers to produce 1 gram of dried saffron. The most expensive spice in the world, sometimes called red gold. The article included sidebar about saffron fraud, cheap substitutes, artificial coloring, weight manipulation. The global market was worth $300 million annually, controlled by Iran, India, Spain. No mention of Philippines. No mention of frozen cultivation facilities or why anyone would seal one closed for 3 decades. They landed in Manila after 15 hours of travel compressed into airplane seats designed for people without spines. Sofia was exhausted, cranky, operating on airplane peanuts and determination. Elena was beyond exhaustion, had passed through tired into some crystalline state of pure forward momentum where stopping meant collapse. Attorney Santos had arranged transport. A driver named Mang Carlos who met them at arrivals holding a sign with Elena's name spelled wrong. He was 60-something, weathered, spoke English with heavy accent that required concentration to parse. Mrs. Reyes. Welcome. Is long drive to Anda. 5, maybe 6 hours depending on traffic and road condition. They left Manila in pre-dawn darkness, driving north through provinces Elena half remembered from childhood. The landscape transformed as they traveled, urban sprawl giving way to rice paddies, highways becoming narrow roads, everything getting smaller and poorer and more remote. Sofia slept against Elena's shoulder while morning light painted mountains gold. Elena watched the Philippines scroll past her window and tried to remember being 9 years old here, tried to access memories of visiting Lola Beatriz before her parents had moved the family to Seattle for opportunities that eventually collapsed under medical debt and bad decisions. She remembered fragments. Lola's garden with vegetables growing in old paint cans. The smell of garlic rice and fried fish. The way her grandmother had moved through life with quiet certainty, never rushing, always observing. Stories about the Saffron facility told in mixture of English and Tagalog Elena couldn't quite translate. Your Lola, Mang Carlos said, apparently reading her thoughts or just making conversation during long drive. She was respected woman, unusual woman, very determined. Did you know her? Everyone in Andon knew her. She lived there until 1989 when the facility closed. Then she moved to Manila, but she came back sometimes, checking on the property, making sure nobody disturbed it. Why did the facility close? Mang Carlos shrugged, navigating a pothole that could have swallowed a small car. Market collapsed. Saffron prices dropped. Cheaper to import from Iran. Also, he hesitated, choosing words carefully. There were stories about the facility, People said it was unusual, that your Lola had discovered something, but nobody knew what. Elena's pulse quickened. What kind of stories? Ghost stories mostly. You know how provincial people talk. But also, practical stories. People said your Lola had built something in the facility. Secret chamber, hidden place where she kept valuable things. But when she closed the facility, she sealed everything. Welded doors, barred windows, hired guards for 2 years until... He trailed off. Until what? Until people lost interest. Until it became just another abandoned building. The guards left. Your Lola stayed in Manila. The property sat empty. Now, 35 years later, everyone has forgotten why it mattered. They drove through Anda municipality around 10 a.m. The town was exactly as Attorney Santos had described. Poor, remote, surviving on fishing and subsistence agriculture. Buildings showed decay from decades of insufficient maintenance. Roads were a mixture of damaged asphalt and dirt. People watched their vehicle pass with a mild curiosity locals reserved for strangers who had no obvious reason to be there. Man Carlos stopped at a roadside store, cement structures selling cigarettes, soft drinks, and various items of indeterminate purpose. He returned with off-road vehicle, an ancient Toyota that looked like it had survived several wars and at least one volcanic eruption. The property is 5 kilometers from town. Access road is very bad. We need this. The access road was worse than bad. It was geological violence, pretending to be transportation infrastructure. Man Carlos navigated ruts, washouts, and sections where road had simply surrendered to jungle, while Elena held Sofia against her and prayed the vehicle's suspension would survive. Then they crested a rise, and Elena saw it. The facility sat in a shallow valley, 2 hectares of land surrounded by stone walls partially collapsed from age and weather. The main building was 3 stories, cement construction with barred windows and doors that did appear to be welded shut. The roof had partially collapsed on one corner. Attorney Santos hadn't exaggerated about that. Surrounding the main building were smaller structures, storage buildings, what looked like worker housing, a system of irrigation channels now filled with vegetation and thyme. But what caught Elena's attention was the color. Despite 35 years of abandonment, despite the collapsed roof and the jungle reclaiming every surface, the facility's walls were stained purple. Faint, faded, but unmistakable. Like the building itself had absorbed the color of millions of saffron crocuses until it bled through cement. Man Carlos parked at the main gate. Iron structure rusted but still standing, padlocked with chain thick enough to anchor a ship. He pulled out bolt cutters from the Toyota's bed. Attorney Santos authorized me to cut the lock. The property is yours now. You have right to access. The chain broke with a sound like a bone snapping. The gate swung open on protesting hinges, and Elena stepped on her grandmother's land for the first time in 34 years. The silence was immediate and complete. No traffic noise from the distant town. No animal sounds from the surrounding jungle. Just wind moving through abandoned buildings and the creak of metal settling. Sofia gripped Elena's hand. Mama, it feels lonely. Here. It does, baby. It's been lonely for a long time. They approached the main building slowly. Up close, the decay was more obvious. Windows broken or covered in decades of grime. Walls cracked from earthquake, or settling, or just time doing what time does to things left unattended. The purple staining was more pronounced near the ground level, concentrated enough that Elena touched it, expecting the color to come off on her fingers. It didn't. The color was part of the cement now, permanent memory of what grew here. The main door was indeed welded shut. Amateur welding job, messy but effective. Man Carlos approached with crowbar, but Elena stopped him. Wait, let's look around first. They circled the building. Every entrance was sealed, every window barred. The smaller structures were more accessible. Storage buildings with rotted doors, worker housing with caved-in roofs, an equipment shed where rusted machinery sat like metallic skeletons. In the equipment shed, Elena found Saffron processing tools, drying racks, sorting tables, weighing scales. Everything industrial grade, built to handle commercial volume. This hadn't been a small family operation. This had been serious cultivation intended for export market. Sofia discovered a smaller building behind the main structure, single story, built partially underground. The door was newer than the others, reinforced steel instead of wood, locked but not welded. A sign in faded Tagalog read, "Cold storage, authorized personnel only." "Mama, this door isn't stuck." Elena examined it. The lock was modern, installed within the last decade based on minimal rust. Someone had been maintaining this structure while letting the rest deteriorate. The keyhole looked standard. Elena tried the crowbar anyway, wedging it against the lock mechanism. Mang Carlos joined her, adding his strength. The lock resisted, held, then broke with a crack that echoed across the valley. The door swung inward, releasing air that was noticeably cooler than the tropical heat outside. "Frozen storage," Mang Carlos said. "Still working somehow." They stepped inside. Emergency lighting flickered on, battery backup systems, still functional after decades. The space was a single large chamber, maybe 20 feet square, walls lined with industrial cooling units that hummed with improbable life. The temperature was close to freezing, and stacked against every wall, protected by the cold, preserved for 35 years, saffron. Not raw saffron, not crocus flowers. Processed saffron threads, vacuum-sealed in clear plastic bags, stacked in commercial plastic bins marked with dates and batch numbers. Hundreds of bins, maybe thousands. Each bag labeled in Lola Beatrice's precise handwriting. Weight, grade, harvest date. Elena pulled out her phone, turned on the flashlight, examined the nearest bag. The threads inside glowed deep crimson in the LED light. Perfect condition. No oxidation. No degradation. Frozen in time exactly as they'd been packed in the late 1980s. She did quick mental math that couldn't possibly be accurate. Each bag maybe 1 pound. Each bin maybe 50 pounds. A conservative estimate put the visible quantity at 10,000 pounds minimum. Saffron sold for $500 to $5,000 per pound, depending on quality and market. Even at lowest grade prices, conservative quantities, pessimistic calculations, this was worth millions. Her hands started shaking. She set down the phone carefully because dropping it might shatter whatever spell was keeping this real instead of hallucination born from desperation and jet lag. "Mama," Sofia's voice was small, scared by Elena's sudden stillness. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, baby." Elena's voice came out strange, tight with something between laughter and tears. Everything's very, very right." Mang Carlos stepped further into the chamber, examining the cooling units with a mechanic's eye. "These are running on what power?" "The facility has no electricity from grid. No generator." Elena found the answer in the far corner. Solar panels, industrial-grade batteries, backup systems layered with redundancy. Lola Beatriz had built a self-sustaining preservation chamber powered by the Philippines' sun, designed to operate for decades without human intervention, protecting her saffron harvest from a market that had collapsed but might someday return. This was what she'd protected, what she'd sealed behind welded doors and maintained with secret visits. Not equipment, not buildings, but product, raw material worth fortunes if it maintained quality, worthless if it degraded. Frozen saffron was unusual because freezing could damage the delicate stigmas, could destroy the volatile compounds that gave saffron its value. But if done correctly, vacuum-sealed, precisely temperature-controlled, protected from light and oxygen, frozen saffron could theoretically last indefinitely. Lola Beatriz had bet everything on theoretically, had sealed millions of dollars in product inside this chamber and waited for someone to find it. Elena pulled out her phone, started photographing. Bins, labels, thread quality visible through plastic. The cooling system specifications. Everything that would need documentation, proof, verification that this wasn't fever dream. Sofia tugged at her jacket. "Mama, are we rich now?" The question was so absurdly childlike, so perfectly cutting to the heart of everything, that Elena nearly laughed, nearly cried, did something that was probably both. "I don't know yet, baby, but I think Lola left us something important, something that might help us." Mang Carlos was examining labels with expression that suggested he was recalculating everything about this trip. Mrs. Reyes, if this is what I think it is, you need to contact authorities, export authorities, agricultural authorities. This is controlled commodity. I need to test it first. Need to know if it's still valuable or if freezing destroyed the quality. How will you test? Elena thought about her ER nursing background, chemical analysis, quality assessment, diagnostic procedures. Not exactly applicable to spice evaluation, but the principles translated. I need to contact Saffron dealers. Get samples appraised. Figure out what I actually have. She pulled out one bag, marked grade A premium, October 1988, 450 grams, and tucked it in her jacket pocket. Evidence. Proof. 1 pound of saffron that would either validate this miracle or prove it was just one more cruel joke. They left the chamber, sealing the door as well as the broken lock allowed. Outside, tropical heat hit like a physical wall after the frozen storage's chill. Elena blinked in the sun that felt too bright, too real, too insistent on making this moment concrete instead of dream. She looked at the facility with new eyes. Not abandoned disaster, but cathedral to her grandmother's faith that patience outlasted market collapses. That protection preserved value. That futures could be built on frozen time if you were willing to wait. The property was still worth $1 in building value. The land still coastal erosion risk in a remote municipality. But the contents, the carefully preserved harvest sealed in cold storage while the world forgot it existed. Those might be worth everything. Elena pulled out her phone, checked for signal. 2 bars. Enough. She composed an email to Attorney Santos, fingers shaking slightly. Arrived at property. Found significant quantity of preserved saffron in working cold storage facility. Need contact information for saffron dealers/appraisers in Manila. Also need information on export procedures for controlled agricultural commodities. Please advise urgently. She hit send and watched the email transmit into the Philippines' digital infrastructure. One message launched into uncertainty, carrying news that would either solve everything or create new problems she couldn't yet imagine. Sofia sat on a chunk of fallen wall, swinging her legs, looking at the purple-stained building with 7-year-old seriousness. Lola was smart, wasn't she? Yes, baby. Lola was very, very smart. Then she wanted you to find this. That's why she left it for you. Elena sat beside her daughter, both of them facing the facility that had preserved a fortune in frozen time. I think you're right. I think this was her gift. Her way of helping us when she couldn't be here anymore. So we can stay together, you and me, and not go to Daddy's house. The custody hearing felt very far away, both in distance and in relevance. If the saffron was real, if it maintained value, if Elena could somehow monetize millions of dollars in frozen commodity without expertise or connections or understanding of international spice markets, then yes, they could afford lawyers, could afford housing, could afford to fight Marco and win because money bought options that desperation couldn't access. But those are very large ifs. I'm going to try, baby. Lola gave us a chance. Now I need to figure out how to use it. They drove back to Manila through afternoon traffic that transformed 5-hour journey into 8-hour endurance test. Sofia slept. Mang Carlos drove in thoughtful silence. Elena stared at her phone, willing Attorney Santos to respond with contact information that would make this real. The email arrived at 7 p.m. Manila traffic gridlocked around them. Mrs. Reyes, * your news is unexpected. I have contacted colleague who specializes in agricultural exports. He recommends Dr. Ramon Cruz, Philippines' leading saffron expert and appraiser. Dr. Cruz worked with your grandmother during facility's operational years. He may be willing to evaluate samples. Warning, if saffron quality is legitimate, you are now in possession of extremely valuable commodity. Secure the property immediately. Do not discuss this discovery publicly until proper legal protections are established. I will prepare documentation for property insurance and establish secure storage protocols. Contact information for Dr. Cruz attached. Exercise extreme caution. Attorney Santos. Elena read it twice, feeling reality shift again. Her grandmother had worked with a saffron expert, someone who knew the operation, who could evaluate whether frozen preservation had maintained value or destroyed it. Someone who could tell her if she'd just inherited a fortune or just more expensive disappointment. She called Dr. Cruz from the taxi. Phone pressed to her ear while Manila's noise erupted around them. He answered on the third ring, voice old but sharp, precise English with academic formality. Dr. Cruz speaking. Dr. Cruz, my name is Elena Reyes. Attorney Santos gave me your contact information. I'm Beatriz Alvarez Reyes' granddaughter. Silence on the line. Then, quietly, Beatriz. I wonder what happened to her facility. She died, yes? 6 months ago? Yes. I am sorry. She was remarkable woman, brilliant cultivator, understood saffron in ways most commercial growers never achieve. Dr. Cruz, I need your help. I found her storage facility. There's saffron inside. Lots of it. Frozen. Sealed. From the 1980s. I need to know if it's still valuable or if freezing destroyed it. Another silence, longer this time. Frozen saffron from 1980s. Still sealed. Beatriz did this? Yes. Where are you now? Manila. Traffic. Maybe an hour from hotel. Bring me sample. Tonight, if possible. My laboratory is in Makati. I will test immediately. This is potentially very important. They met at 9 p.m. in a laboratory that smelled like chemicals and controlled temperature. Dr. Cruz was 70-something, gray-haired, moving with careful precision of scientist who'd spent decades working with delicate materials. Elena handed him the bag of frozen saffron. He held it up to the light, examining threads through plastic with intensity that bordered on religious. His hand started shaking slightly. Mrs. Reyes, this appears to be premium-grade Crocus sativus, style and stigma intact, color preservation extraordinary. But I must test to verify. Please, sit. This will take 1 hour. Elena and Sofia sat in the laboratory's waiting area while Dr. Cruz worked. Through the glass partition, Elena watched him prepare samples, run tests she didn't understand, make notes with the careful handwriting of academic documentation. At 10:30 p.m., he emerged. His expression was unreadable, somewhere between shock and professional excitement, trying to remain controlled. Mrs. Reyes, your grandmother was genius. Elena's heart stopped. It's real? It's still valuable? Not just valuable. Perfect. The freezing preservation, the vacuum sealing, the controlled temperature. She created ideal conditions. The crocin content is 89%, which exceeds ISO 3632 category I standards. The saffronal concentration is preserved at harvest levels. The molecular structure shows no degradation. He paused, searching for words. This is possibly the finest saffron I have analyzed in 40 years of research. The words didn't fully process. Elena heard them, understood their individual meanings, but couldn't assemble them into implications that made sense. Dr. Cruz continued, pulling out documentation, showing her chemical analysis she couldn't interpret. Your grandmother's harvest was always exceptional, but I never imagined she preserved it. The market collapsed in 1987 to 88. Everyone liquidated stock at terrible prices. Or tried to. Most lost everything when product degraded in poor storage. But Lola didn't sell. No, she sealed it, protected it, waited, and now, 35 years later, her saffron is worth. He calculated on paper, handwriting neat. Current market rates for saffron of this quality, approximately $4,200 to $4,800 per pound. Export dealers would pay premium for verified authenticity. Conservative estimate, assuming 10,000 pounds total, between 42 and 48 million US dollars. The number didn't land properly. Too large. Too impossible. Elena heard the words, but couldn't attach meaning to them that mapped onto her reality of shelter bunks and custody hearings and $847 that was now. Zero. That can't be right. I assure you, Mrs. Reyes, the calculations are conservative. If the storage facility contains more than 10,000 pounds, or if you find buyers willing to pay premium for historically verified product, the value could exceed. He paused. Could substantially exceed $100 million. Sofia looked up from a coloring book Dr. Cruz's assistant had provided. Mama, did the nice man say we have $100 million? Elena couldn't answer, couldn't breathe, could only sit there while Dr. Cruz gently took her hand and spoke with the kindness of someone delivering news too large for anyone to carry alone. Your grandmother protected this for you, for your family. She knew someday someone would need it. That someone is you. Elena didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Her brain kept trying to process numbers too large to feel real while her body existed in a Manila hotel room that cost $35 and smelled like old carpet and somebody else's cigarette smoke from a decade ago. Sofia slept curled against her, breathing the easy rhythm of children who trusted their mothers to handle impossible things. Elena stared at the ceiling fan's lazy rotation and tried to think through implications that kept multiplying like aggressive bacteria. $48 million. Conservative estimate. Possibly more. Enough money to erase homelessness, custody battles, every financial mistake Marco had made and she'd paid for. Enough to never worry about rent or food or whether Sofia's jacket was warm enough for Seattle winter. But between Elena and that money stood a series of obstacles she couldn't yet map. Property taxes owed, export regulations she didn't understand, authentication processes that probably required documentation she didn't have, and the basic logistical nightmare of converting 10,000 pounds of frozen saffron into actual usable currency. Her phone buzzed at 6 a.m. Email from Dr. Cruz, sent at 5:47 a.m., suggesting he'd also spent the night awake processing discoveries too significant for sleep. Mrs. Reyes, I have prepared preliminary authentication report for your grandmother's saffron. However, I must advise several urgent concerns. 1. Property security. You must hire guards immediately. Once word spreads about the discovery, theft risk becomes extreme. 2. Legal documentation. You need verified chain of custody proving this saffron originated from your grandmother's facility. Without this, customs authorities may suspect illegal import or smuggling. 3. Export permits. Saffron is controlled agricultural commodity. Export requires Department of Agriculture approval, phytosanitary certificates, and proper licensing. This process typically requires 6 to 8 months. 4. Market contacts. I can introduce you to legitimate saffron dealers in Spain, Iran, and UAE who would pay premium for product of this quality. However, negotiations require expert representation to prevent exploitation. 5. Tax implications. This discovery constitutes taxable inheritance. Estate taxes plus potential export taxes could claim 30 to 40% of total value. Consult tax attorney immediately. I am willing to assist with authentication and dealer connections. Your grandmother was my colleague and friend. I owe her memory this service. Please contact me when you're ready to proceed. Dr. Ramon Cruz. Elena read it 3 times, each reading adding weight to her chest. Every solution created new problems. Every step forward revealed complications she hadn't anticipated. The saffron was real, was valuable, but accessing that value required navigating legal and bureaucratic systems designed by people who'd never been homeless and didn't care about 2-week custody deadlines. Sofia woke, blinked at Manila morning light filtering through thin hotel curtains, and announced with 7-year-old certainty, I'm hungry, and this room smells weird. I know, baby. Let's get breakfast, then we have work to do. They found food at a street vendor near the hotel. Pandesal hot chocolate that Sofia declared better than anything in Seattle, which probably had more to do with novelty than actual quality. Elena's phone kept buzzing with messages she needed to read but couldn't process while managing a 7-year-old and street food simultaneously. Attorney Santos. Mrs. Reyes, I have prepared emergency property security contract. Guards will be deployed today at your authorization. Cost is $200 per day. Please confirm. Man Carlos. Mrs. Reyes, people in Anda are asking questions. News travels fast in small town. I recommend you return to secure the facility before others investigate. Marco's lawyer, Ms. Wilson, Mrs. Reyes, you missed yesterday's custody mediation session. Judge has ruled in your ex-husband's favor due to your failure to appear. Transfer of custody will proceed as scheduled. Contact our office immediately to arrange Sofia's return to Seattle. The last message landed like physical violence. Elena's hand shook hard enough that hot chocolate sloshed over the cup rim. She'd been so focused on the Saffron, on the impossible discovery, that she'd forgotten, literally forgotten, about the custody hearing scheduled for yesterday, Seattle time. She was 16 hours ahead in Manila. The hearing had happened while she was driving back from Anda, while she was meeting Dr. Cruz, while she was discovering her grandmother's frozen fortune. And now Sofia's custody was gone, lost to missed court dates and housing instability in a system that didn't care about undiscovered Saffron millions when evaluating parental fitness. Sofia noticed her mother's face. "Mama? What's wrong?" Elena forced her expression into something approaching normal. "Nothing, baby. Just grown-up stuff. Finish your breakfast." But everything was wrong. She'd gambled their last dollars on a property worth potentially $100 million and lost Sofia anyway because she hadn't been physically present in a Seattle courtroom to explain why an abandoned Filipino Saffron facility mattered more than court-mandated mediation. She called Ms. Chen, the legal aid lawyer, fingers shaking so hard she nearly dropped the phone. It rang 4 times before connecting. Seattle was yesterday afternoon. Ms. Chen probably in court or managing 12 other impossible cases for clients who couldn't afford better representation. Ms. Chen speaking. "It's Elena Reyes. I'm in the Philippines. I got the message about the custody ruling. I need to appeal." "I have." She stopped, unsure how to explain frozen Saffron millions to a lawyer who'd last seen her as a homeless shelter resident. "I have circumstances that have changed, significantly changed. I need emergency hearing to present new evidence." Silence on the line. Then Ms. Chen's voice, carefully neutral. "Mrs. Reyes, you missed your mediation hearing. That demonstrates unreliability to the court. Judge Morrison takes these hearings very seriously." "I know. I had to travel. Family emergency. But I've inherited property. Valuable property. I can provide housing stability now. I just need time to..." "What kind of property?" "Agricultural land. In the Philippines. With assets. Worth substantial amount." The words felt absurd saying them out loud, especially to a lawyer who'd seen Elena's bank statements showing $847 in total assets. How substantial? Elena took a breath. "Potentially tens of millions of dollars. I'm working with appraisers now, getting documentation. But I need time to liquidate and transfer funds. The custody transfer is supposed to happen in 12 days. I need the court to delay until I can prove financial stability." Another silence, longer. "Mrs. Reyes, I need you to understand something. Judges hear claims about unexpected inheritances frequently from parents fighting custody battles. Usually these claims are optimistic projections rather than verifiable assets. If you're asking me to petition Judge Morrison for emergency delay based on unverified foreign inheritance, I need concrete evidence. Documentation. Something beyond your word. I have chemical analysis from the Philippines' leading Saffron expert. I have property documentation from my grandmother's estate attorney. I have photographs of the storage facility showing quantity. What else do you need? Certified appraisal from U.S. recognized authority. Proof that you can access these funds within the custody timeline. Evidence that this isn't speculative value, but actual liquid assets. Judge Morrison won't delay based on potential money. Only verified, accessible resources." Elena's chest tightened. Getting U.S. certified appraisal would require shipping samples internationally, finding recognized experts, completing analysis that might take weeks, and accessing the funds. Converting frozen Saffron into actual transferable currency required export permits that took 6 to 8 months, according to Dr. Cruz. "I can't get all that in 12 days. Then I can't help you with emergency appeal." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Reyes. The ruling stands." Sofia returns to her father's custody as scheduled. "You'll have visitation rights, but primary custody transfers to your ex-husband. There has to be something. There is. Come home. Attend the custody transfer meeting. Demonstrate cooperation with the court's ruling. Build your case over the next 6 months and petition for modified custody arrangement once your financial situation is actually verified. Fighting this now, without concrete evidence, will only make you look unstable. The call ended. Elena sat on a Manila street corner with her daughter, eating pandesal, and felt the particular despair that comes from having solutions too large to use quickly enough. She found her grandmother's fortune. But fortunes frozen in agricultural commodities couldn't be spent on custody lawyers or used as evidence in Seattle family courts. She needed to transform potential into actual. Needed to take 10,000 pounds of frozen threads and convert them into currency that judges would recognize. Needed to do in days what normally took months, and do it from a country she barely remembered with resources she didn't have. Sofia finished her breakfast, wiped chocolate from her chin with the back of her hand, and looked at Elena with expression too serious for 7 years old. Are we going back to Daddy's house? I don't know yet, baby. I'm trying to fix it. Ow! Elena pulled her daughter close, breathing in the smell of her hair that was coconut shampoo and Manila humidity, and every reason Elena couldn't give up. By being very, very smart, and very, very fast, and asking for help from people Lola trusted. She called Attorney Santos, explained the custody situation with blunt efficiency. No time for diplomatic phrasing when 12 days separated her from permanent loss. His response was immediate and surprisingly practical. Mrs. Reyes, I cannot expedite Department of Agriculture permits, but I can do something else. I can sell portion of the saffron domestically. No export permits required for domestic sales. Lower prices than international market, but immediate liquidity. How much lower? Perhaps 60% of international value. But payment in cash, immediate, no bureaucratic delay. Elena did the math. 10,000 pounds at 60% of $4,500 average price was approximately $27 million. Enough to solve every problem. More than enough to prove housing stability to Seattle family courts. Can you arrange domestic sales in 12 days? No, but I can arrange sales in 5 days if you accept lower price. 50% of international value. I have contacts among Filipino pharmaceutical companies, luxury restaurants, specialty importers. They will purchase without extensive authentication if I personally vouch for quality and Dr. Cruz provides documentation. 5 days. Elena could fly back to Seattle with verified bank transfer showing millions in accessible funds. Could hire actual custody lawyers instead of overworked legal aid attorneys. Could face Judge Morrison with evidence too large to dismiss as desperation fantasy. Do it. Sell whatever quantity you need to generate $5 million immediate payment. That's enough to prove stability and cover property taxes and legal fees. Understood. I will begin negotiations today. But Mrs. Reyes, selling at 50% is significant loss. You would be leaving substantial money unclaimed. I'm not leaving it. I'm using it as down payment on getting my daughter back. The rest can wait. Attorney Santos made a sound that might have been approval or might have been acknowledgement that maternal desperation made financial decisions most business people would call insane. Very well. I will contact buyers immediately. Expect updates within 24 hours. The next call was to Dr. Cruz, explaining what she needed. Documentation strong enough to satisfy Filipino pharmaceutical buyers that the saffron was legitimate, and authentication reports formatted for U.S. legal recognition in case she needed to submit them to family court. I can provide both, Dr. Cruz said. But Mrs. Reyes, I must advise, if you are selling portion domestically at discount, let me negotiate. These buyers will attempt to exploit your urgency. I know the market. I know fair prices even for expedited sales. Trust me with this. Why would you help me? You barely know me. His voice came back gentle with memory. Your grandmother saved my research program 25 years ago. My university cut funding. I was going to lose my laboratory. Beatrice donated saffron samples worth $20,000 for my research without expecting repayment. She said she was investing in knowledge. That good science mattered more than short-term profit. Elena's throat closed. That sounded exactly like Lola Beatriz, prioritizing principle over profit, believing in long-term value of things that couldn't be immediately monetized. She never told me that story. She was a private woman, but she believed in helping people who would help others. You are her granddaughter. You inherited her values along with her Saffron. I will negotiate on your behalf, because that is what she would want. The next 3 days blurred together in ways that made time feel elastic and unreliable. Elena and Sofia stayed in Manila while Attorney Santos, Dr. Cruz, and an expanding network of lawyers, pharmaceutical buyers, and logistics coordinators worked to transform frozen saffron into liquid currency. Elena learned more about international spice markets in 72 hours than she'd learned about anything since nursing school. Quality grades, price negotiation, bulk purchase contracts, testing protocols, customs documentation. Information arrived in floods via email, phone calls, WhatsApp messages from people speaking a mixture of English and Tagalog, and technical terminology that required translation apps and repeated explanation. Dr. Cruz arranged for 3 separate Filipino pharmaceutical companies to visit the ANDA facility, examine the storage conditions, and verify quality through on-site testing. Each company sent representatives who drove the 5-hour journey, spent hours in the frozen chamber examining bins and running tests, and left making offers that Attorney Santos rejected as insultingly low before counterproposing prices that presumably reflected fair market value minus urgency discount. Sofia spent those 3 days alternating between boredom and fascination. Bored when Elena was on phone calls discussing technical specifications she couldn't follow. Fascinated when hotel staff brought street food or when they took brief breaks to explore Manila's mall complexes where air conditioning and familiar retail brands provided small anchors to normalcy. On day 3, Attorney Santos called with an update that sounded like victory disguised as complication. Mrs. Reyes, I have secured commitments from 2 buyers. Total purchase of £2,000 at $2,250 per pound. Total payment, $4.5 million US. Payment will be wired to your designated account within 48 hours of contract execution. $4.5 million. Enough to prove housing stability. Enough to hire lawyers who charged actual money instead of working for legal aid. Enough to transform her from homeless shelter resident to woman with resources courts couldn't dismiss. What about the property taxes? The 4 years of delinquent payments? The municipal government has agreed to accept payment of 127,000 Philippine pesos, approximately $2,270 US. I will pay from initial buyer deposits. Property will be cleared of tax liens within the week. And the facility security, the guard you mentioned? Deployed since our first conversation. 8 guards on rotating shifts. The facility is now secured. No one enters without authorization. Cost is being deducted from sales proceeds. Everything was happening. Actually happening. Elena sat in the hotel room with contract documents Attorney Santos had sent electronically, reading terms she barely understood, but signed anyway, because expertise couldn't be acquired fast enough to make better decisions. Sofia watched her mother sign page after page of legal documents, small face serious. Mama, is this how being rich works? Lots of paper and phone calls? I think so, baby. Apparently money requires documentation. That seems boring. Can't we just have the money without all the paper? I wish. But grown-ups made rules about this stuff a long time ago. Now everyone has to follow them, even when they're annoying. The contracts executed on day 4. Attorney Santos confirmed electronic signatures, verified buyer deposits, and sent Elena bank account setup instructions for transferring international funds. She spent 6 hours in a Philippine Bank of Commerce branch filling out paperwork while Sofia colored at a desk meant for wealthy depositors discussing investment portfolios. The bank manager, a woman named Grace who was professionally courteous but clearly skeptical about Elena's claimed inheritance, processed the account setup with the careful scrutiny of someone who'd seen fraud before and wasn't eager to facilitate more. Mrs. Reyes, you understand that international wire transfers of this size require extensive documentation, source of funds verification, anti-money laundering compliance, tax withholding. The process is not immediate. How not immediate? 3 to 5 business days for the transfers to clear once initiated. Then potentially additional days for your U.S. bank to process foreign deposits. I would estimate 7 to 10 days total before funds are fully accessible. 7 to 10 days. Elena had 8 days before custody transfer. It would work. Barely. Assuming nothing delayed, nothing went wrong, no additional bureaucratic obstacles emerged. I need it as fast as possible. This is urgent. Grace's expression suggested she'd heard similar claims before from people who inevitably had complicated reasons for urgency that often involved divorce settlements or insurance disputes or other messy personal situations banks preferred to avoid. I will mark it priority processing. But Mrs. Reyes, I cannot accelerate international banking procedures beyond established protocols. The money will arrive when it arrives. The waiting was worse than the work had been. For the next 4 days, Elena existed in suspended state between past poverty and future security, unable to fully believe either. She checked her bank balance obsessively, watching the account that had contained $0. 0 since buying plane tickets, willing $4.5 million to materialize through force of desperate attention. Sofia started asking when they were going home. Elena couldn't answer because home was currently a shelter bunk they'd abandoned, a custody transfer they were trying to prevent, and a future that depended on Filipino pharmaceutical companies fulfilling wire transfer commitments on timeline that was already tighter than comfortable. On day 7, 5 days before custody transfer deadline, Grace called with the update Elena had been waiting for with intensity that bordered on religious fervor. Mrs. Reyes, the transfers have cleared. Your account now shows balance of $4,500,000 US. The words didn't process correctly. Elena asked Grace to repeat them, then asked a third time, then finally accepted that her bank account, the account that had been empty for 3 months, that had contained $847 before plane tickets, that represented years of financial destruction from Marco's gambling debts, now held more money than she could conceptualize. It's actually there? In my account? I can access it? Yes, Mrs. Reyes. Though I must advise that moving large sums requires careful planning. Wire transfer limits, tax implications, investment considerations. I strongly recommend you consult with financial advisor before making significant withdrawals. I need to wire $100,000 to my U.S. attorney immediately. Can I do that today? Yes, I can arrange that transfer. Please provide recipient banking information. Elena spent the afternoon wiring money to Ms. Chen's law firm, not for legal aid services, but hiring her properly as retained counsel with the kind of retainer that meant responsive service and aggressive court filings. She wired another $50,000 to a Seattle custody attorney whose name she'd found through frantic Google searches and whose website promised experience with complex international custody cases. Then she booked 2 business-class tickets back to Seattle, departing the next morning. Business class because she could afford it now, because Sofia deserved leg room and proper meals, because flying economy while having millions in the bank felt like psychological violence Elena couldn't inflict on herself. That night, Sofia fell asleep early, exhausted from a week of uncertainty and hotel rooms and grown-up conversations she couldn't quite follow. Elena sat on the balcony of their hotel room, overlooking Manila traffic, and tried to process transformation too rapid to feel real. 1 week ago, she'd been homeless. Had spent her last dollar on plane tickets to see property worth $1. Had been facing permanent custody loss with no options and no hope. Now she had millions, had lawyers who return calls, had bank managers addressing her as valued client, had proof of housing stability that would make Judge Morrison's custody ruling look absurd in retrospect. But she also had 8,000 pounds of saffron still sitting in frozen storage in Anda. Had export permits that would take 6 months to process. had security guards costing $200 daily protecting property that was valuable enough to attract attention from people who wouldn't politely request access. The easy part was done. She'd converted enough Saffron to solve immediate crisis. Now came the hard part, protecting the rest while navigating export regulations, tax implications, and the basic logistical nightmare of maintaining frozen storage in remote Filipino province while living in Seattle. Her phone buzzed. Email from Dr. Cruz, sent at 11 p.m. Manila time because apparently Saffron experts didn't sleep. Mrs. Reyes, I've been contacted by representatives claiming to work for International Saffron Consortium. They are inquiring about your grandmother's facility with suspicious specificity. Questions about quantity, quality, storage conditions. They should not know these details unless someone breached security. I have not disclosed information, but I suspect buyers you sold to have been discussing their acquisition. Word spreads quickly in specialty markets. Please advise if you wish me to respond to these inquiries or maintain silence. Also, you should be aware, if international buyers learn of significant quantity of premium frozen saffron, offers will come. Some legitimate, some not. Distinguish carefully. Dr. Cruz Elena read it twice, feeling nascent security curdle into new anxiety. Of course, word was spreading. She'd sold 2,000 pounds to Philippine pharmaceutical companies who would naturally discuss their acquisition. Industry contacts would hear. Competitors would investigate. And eventually someone would calculate that if 2,000 pounds existed, more probably did too. The saffron had value because it was rare, but rarity also made a target. She'd solve her immediate crisis, but had simultaneously announced to international spice markets that millions of dollars in frozen products sat in remote facility protected by 8 guards who probably weren't prepared for sophisticated theft. She emailed Dr. Cruz back. Please maintain silence about quantity and storage details. Respond to inquiries by saying you cannot discuss client information without authorization. I will be in Seattle, but can be reached by email/phone for urgent matters. Thank you for warning. Then she emailed Attorney Santos with more urgent concern. Please arrange facility insurance immediately. Also investigate upgrading security. 8 guards may not be sufficient if theft risk escalates. Authorize necessary spending for protection. She was learning that having money meant spending money to protect money. Security, insurance, lawyers, accountants who'd need to handle tax implications, export consultants who'd navigate Department of Agriculture permits. Each solution cost, even when solving problems that only existed because she'd discovered wealth. Tomorrow she'd fly back to Seattle, would face custody proceedings with resources that made her previous situation unrecognizable, would begin whatever long process was required to liquidate the remaining saffron and transform frozen fortune into actual usable life. But tonight she sat on a Manila balcony and whispered gratitude to Lola Beatriz for believing that frozen saffron could outlast market collapses, for protecting a harvest when everyone else was selling at terrible prices, for waiting 35 years for someone who needed it badly enough to fight for it. Thank you, Elena said to her grandmother's memory. Thank you for giving us a chance. The flight back to Seattle was surreal in ways that had nothing to do with jet lag. Elena and Sofia sat in business class seats that reclined into actual beds. 8 meals served on real plates were addressed by flight attendants with a particular courtesy reserved for passengers who'd paid premium prices. Sofia thought it was magical, kept pressing buttons that controlled seat position and entertainment screens, asking if they could fly like this always from now on. Elena couldn't explain that even with millions in the bank, flying business class felt like psychological adjustment she hadn't fully made yet. They landed at SeaTac at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday. Elena's phone exploded with notifications the moment she cleared customs. Messages and emails that had been queuing while she was over the Pacific. Ms. Chen, Mrs. Reyes, receive your retainer. Thank you. I have filed emergency motion with Judge Morrison requesting custody, ruling delay. Hearing scheduled for Friday at 9 a.m. I will need all documentation regarding your financial circumstances. Please send ASAP. The custody attorney she'd hired, David Brennan, whose website promised aggressive representation, had sent even more urgent message: need to speak immediately. Marco's attorney filed countermotion claiming you've abandoned Sofia by taking her to foreign country without notification. They're arguing parental kidnapping. Call me. Elena's stomach dropped. She'd been so focused on proving financial stability that she hadn't considered how international travel without Marco's consent might look to a judge already inclined toward his custody petition. She called Brennan from SeaTac baggage claim. Sofia, sitting on her luggage, looking tired and confused about why they were back in Seattle when Manila had been interesting. Brennan answered on first ring. Mrs. Reyes, we need to talk about your trip to the Philippines. I inherited property. I had to see it. Is that illegal? Not illegal, but problematic when you're in active custody dispute. Marco's attorney is arguing you fled the jurisdiction with Sofia to avoid court proceedings. They are unstable, unpredictable, potentially planning not to return. That's insane. We came back. Obviously now. But the trip looked concerning when you missed your mediation hearing and disappeared to foreign country. Judge Morrison takes flight risk very seriously in custody cases. Elena wanted to scream. Wanted to explain that checking on property worth millions wasn't fleeing jurisdiction. It was securing her daughter's financial future. But apparently securing futures looked identical to fleeing country when observed by family court judges with limited information. What do I need to do? Friday's hearing. Bring every document proving the inheritance is real. Bank statements showing the wire transfer. Property documentation from Philippines. Expert appraisals. Anything that demonstrates you made rational financial decision rather than erratic choice driven by custody pressure. I have all of that. Good. Also, where are you staying tonight? The question landed with weight Elena hadn't anticipated. I don't know. Shelter, I guess. Unless they gave away our bunks when we left. No, absolutely not. Shelter residence, while claiming financial stability, will undermine your entire argument. Marco's attorney will crucify you. You need to check in a hotel. Somewhere stable. Not luxury. That looks like you're burning through money recklessly. But respectable. Residence inn or similar. Establish stable address before Friday. Elena booked into residence in near SeaTac Airport. 2-bedroom suite at $149 per night that felt simultaneously expensive and absurdly cheap given her current bank balance. Sofia was delighted. Real beds, TV remote, kitchenette where they could actually cook food instead of heating things on camping stoves. Mama, is this our house now? Hotel, baby. Temporary. But can we stay? It's nicer than the van. Elena pulled her daughter close, breathing in the shampoo smell of her hair that was airplane air and recycled oxygen, and every reason this fight mattered. We'll stay as long as we need to. And after this is done, we'll find a real house. A permanent one. I promise. Sofia nodded against her shoulder. I believe you. The next 3 days were preparation marathon. Elena gathered documentation with the systematic efficiency she'd learned as ER nurse triaging emergencies. Bank statements, wire transfer confirmations, Attorney Santos' authentication reports, Dr. Cruz's chemical analysis, property tax payment receipts, photographs of the facility showing quantity and storage conditions. She met with Brennan twice, rehearsing testimony for Friday's hearing. Practicing answers to questions Marco's attorney would inevitably ask. Why did you go to the Philippines? Why didn't you notify your ex-husband? How do we know this inheritance is real and not fabricated to influence custody? Brennan was blunt in ways that probably came from years representing desperate parents in impossible situations. Mrs. Reyes, your story sounds fantastic. Homeless single mother inherits millions in frozen saffron from grandmother she barely knew. It reads like fiction. Judge Morrison will be skeptical. It's not fiction. I have proof. You have documentation. That's different from proof Judge Morrison will find persuasive. He's conservative, traditional, believes custody should favor stability over potential. Your sudden wealth is potential, not established stability. What does he need to see? Long-term housing secured. Not hotel. Actual apartment or house with lease agreement. Employment plan that doesn't depend on liquidating foreign assets. Demonstration that you can provide consistent, stable environment regardless of whether remaining Saffron sells. Elena spent Thursday apartment hunting with the particular desperation of someone who'd been homeless 3 weeks ago and now needed a sign, lease proving stability to satisfy judge she'd never met. She toured 6 properties, all requiring first month, last month, security deposit, and credit checks that would reveal bankruptcy from Marco's gambling debts. The 7th property manager, woman named Patricia, who ran a renovated building in Capitol Hill, listened to Elena's explanation with expression that suggested she'd heard every custody story imaginable and had developed sophisticated bullshit detector. So, you were homeless 3 weeks ago, and now you want to rent my 2-bedroom for $3,200 a month? Yes. And you can prove income? Elena pulled out bank statement showing $5 million in available funds. Patricia's eyebrows rose fractionally, only visible reaction to information that probably contradicted every assumption she'd made about this prospect. That's substantial. How did you acquire this? Inheritance. From my grandmother. Agricultural property in the Philippines. Patricia studied the bank statement longer than necessary, clearly trying to reconcile homeless single mother with 7-figure account. I'll need verification from your bank. And 3 months rent up front given your credit history. Done. Can I sign the lease today? You can sign after verification clears, which will take 2 business days. I can't expedite that. 2 business days. Hearing was tomorrow. Elena wouldn't have signed lease by the time she faced Judge Morrison, which meant she'd be appearing as hotel resident claiming financial stability, which was better than shelter but worse than actual secured housing. She called Brennan with the update. His response was resigned acceptance of imperfect circumstances. Hotel plus lease pending is better than nothing. We'll present it as active housing search with immediate financial capacity. It's not ideal, but it demonstrates intention and ability. Friday morning arrived with Seattle rain that felt like judgment. Elena dressed in the most professional clothes she owned, scrubs from her urgent care job that Marco's lawyer would probably cite as evidence she was still working poor despite millions in offshore accounts. Sofia stayed with Vera Martinez, who'd agreed via phone to watch her during the hearing. Vera had been surprisingly unsurprised by Elena's news about the inheritance, responding with the pragmatism of someone who'd seen enough of life to know that impossible things happened with regularity. Of course your grandmother left you millions in frozen spice. That's exactly the kind of thing grandmothers do when they're not leaving you embroidered handkerchiefs. The courthouse was downtown Seattle, modern building designed to project institutional authority through architectural choices meant to intimidate people already nervous. About facing judges, Elena met Brennan in a lobby 15 minutes before the hearing. He looked over her documentation one final time with the focus of lawyer who knew that small details destroyed cases in family court. Remember, stick to facts. Don't let Marco's attorney bait you into emotional responses. Judge Morrison values rationality above everything. If you lose your temper, you lose credibility. They entered the courtroom at 8:55 a.m. Marco was already there with his attorney, Ms. Wilson, polished and professional in a way that communicated expensive hourly rates. Marco himself looked exactly as Elena remembered. Handsome, confident, wearing concern like costume he'd practiced in mirror. He nodded at Elena with expression meant to convey reasonable divorced parent worried about daughter's welfare. Elena forced herself not to react, not to show the anger that burned in her chest at this man who destroyed their finances, abandoned his family, and was now weaponizing the consequences of his own choices to take custody from the parent who'd actually suffered. Judge Morrison entered at 9 o'clock exactly. He was 60-something, gray-haired, moving with the careful precision of someone whose body hurt but refused to show weakness. He reviewed the case file briefly, then looked up with expression that communicated exhausted patience with people whose personal disasters became his professional obligation. This is emergency motion regarding custody modification in the matter of Reyes versus Reyes. Ms. Chen, You file the motion. Proceed. Ms. Chen stood. Her earlier skepticism transformed into professional advocacy that suggested she'd been convinced by Elena's documentation, even if her personal opinion remained complicated. Your Honor, Mrs. Reyes requests delay of custody transfer based on dramatically changed financial circumstances. When the court ruled 3 weeks ago, Mrs. Reyes was residing in homeless shelter with no stable housing. That situation has changed substantially. How substantially? Mrs. Reyes inherited agricultural property in the Philippines worth approximately $50 million. She has liquidated portion of that asset and now has $4.5 million in immediately accessible funds. She is actively securing housing and has the financial capacity to provide stable environment for her daughter. Judge Morrison's expression didn't change. Ms. Wilson response? Marco's attorney stood with the careful confidence of someone who'd prepared for exactly this argument. Your Honor, Mrs. Reyes' claim is, frankly, fantastical. 3 weeks ago, she was homeless and destitute. Now she claims to have millions based on alleged inheritance from foreign grandmother she hadn't contacted in years. The timing is suspicious. The amounts are unverifiable. And even if we accept her bank statements at face value, sudden wealth doesn't demonstrate stability. It demonstrates potential for erratic financial decisions. Judge Morrison looked at Elena. Mrs. Reyes, tell me about this inheritance. Elena stood, forcing her voice to stay steady despite pulse hammering in her ears. My grandmother, Beatriz Alvarez Reyes, passed away 6 months ago in the Philippines. She left me agricultural property, a saffron cultivation facility that had been closed since 1989. The facility contained approximately 10,000 pounds of preserved saffron worth millions on international market. I traveled to the Philippines to inspect the property and found the storage facility intact. I sold portion to Filipino pharmaceutical buyers and used proceeds to establish financial stability. You missed your mediation hearing to do this. Yes, Your Honor. I realized the timing was terrible, but I had limited window to secure the property before municipal authorities seized it for tax delinquency. I made a decision to prioritize my daughter's long-term security over one mediation session. You took your daughter to foreign country without notifying her father. Your Honor, I was exercising my legal custody rights as Sofia's mother. Mr. Reyes was informed of our travel, just not in advance due to time constraints. Marco stood, his expression carefully calibrated to show her reasonable parent. Your Honor, I wasn't informed until they'd already left the country. I had no idea where my daughter was for a week. Elena has been erratic since our divorce. This trip is further evidence that Sofia needs stable home environment. Judge Morrison held up a hand, silencing Marco. Mr. Reyes, you'll have opportunity to present your case. Right now, I'm evaluating Mrs. Reyes' circumstances. He turned back to Elena, studying her with expression that suggested he was trying to solve an equation with insufficient variables. Mrs. Reyes, you have bank statements showing $4.5 million. You have documentation from Filipino attorneys. You have chemical analysis reports I don't understand. What you don't have is actual stability. You're living in a hotel. You have no secured housing, no employment plan. Just money that appeared suddenly and could disappear just as quickly. Your Honor, I have lease agreement pending on Capitol Hill apartment. I'm waiting for verification to complete, and I'm currently establishing import business to manage the remaining Saffron assets. I have specific, concrete plans for providing stable environment. Pending lease isn't secured housing. Business plans aren't employment. Mrs. Reyes, I understand you've had a remarkable turn of fortune, but this court's responsibility is Sofia's immediate welfare, not your potential future circumstances. Brennan stood. Your Honor, Mrs. Reyes has demonstrated extraordinary resourcefulness in securing her daughter's future. She traveled internationally, navigated complex foreign legal systems, liquidated millions in assets, and established financial foundation in less than 3 weeks. These aren't actions of unstable parent. These are actions of determined mother protecting her child, or actions of desperate parent making erratic decisions under pressure. Ms. Wilson, your position? Marco's attorney moved with confidence of someone who sensed victory approaching. Your Honor, Mr. Reyes has 4-bedroom home in Bellevue, stable employment as dentist, established routine that provides consistency for Sofia. Mrs. Reyes has hotel room and foreign bank account. Even accepting her inheritance claim, sudden wealth doesn't replace years of instability. We maintain that custody transfer should proceed as originally ordered. Judge Morrison was silent for a long moment. Elena watched his face, trying to read expression that remained professionally neutral. Finally, he spoke with the careful precision of judge delivering ruling he knew would anger someone regardless of decision. This is preliminary hearing on emergency motion. I'm not prepared to rule today on whether Mrs. Reyes' changed circumstances warrant custody modification. However, I'm also not prepared to proceed with immediate custody transfer given the financial evidence presented. Elena's chest tightened. Not victory, but not defeat either. Here's my ruling. Custody transfer is delayed 60 days. During this time, Mrs. Reyes will demonstrate actual stability, secured housing, established routine, evidence that this windfall translates into reliable environment for her daughter. Mr. Reyes will have supervised visitation twice weekly. At the end of 60 days, we'll reconvene and evaluate whether circumstances warrant modified custody arrangement. He looked at Elena directly. Mrs. Reyes, you have 2 months to prove this isn't temporary, that you can actually provide the stability your daughter needs. Don't waste it. The gavel fell. Hearing concluded. Elena stood in the courtroom with Brennan beside her and felt something in her chest unclench fractionally. Not victory, just delay. Extension on deadline that had been strangling her. Time to build actual stability instead of just claiming it. Brennan leaned close, voice quiet. You got lucky. Judge Morrison could have ruled immediately in Marco's favor. He gave you a chance because the money is real, even if he's skeptical. Don't waste it. I won't. Outside the courtroom, Marco intercepted them with expression that mixed anger and confusion in ways that suggested he hadn't prepared for Elena actually mounting effective defense. Where did you really get the money, Elena? I told you. Inheritance from my grandmother. That's convenient. You were homeless a month ago, and suddenly you're a millionaire right when custody is being decided? Convenient for me, yes. Inconvenient for you. Maybe that's why you're questioning it. His face flushed. I'm questioning it because it's insane. Because you disappeared to the Philippines with our daughter and came back claiming you found frozen fortune. Because this feels like elaborate fiction designed to manipulate the court. Believe whatever you want, Marco. Judge Morrison gave me 60 days. I'll spend them building the stable home you destroyed with your gambling debts. She walked away before he could respond. Before the anger she'd been controlling in the courtroom erupted into something that would get reported back to Judge Morrison as evidence of instability. Sofia was waiting with Vera back at Residence Inn. Her daughter looked up as Elena entered with expression that held too much adult worry for 7 years old. Do we win? Elena sat beside her, pulled her close. Not yet, baby. But we got more time. 60 days to show the judge we have a real home. Can you be patient for 60 more days? Sofia nodded with seriousness that broke Elena's heart. I can be patient forever if it means we stay together. The 60 days Judge Morrison had given Elena became a masterclass in transformation compressed in a timeline that should have been impossible but somehow wasn't. Day 1. Elena signed the Capitol Hill apartment lease. Patricia, the property manager, had completed verification faster than promised, possibly because bank statements showing 7 figures made bureaucratic processes suddenly cooperative. 2-bedroom unit on the 3rd floor, hardwood floors, windows facing east where morning light would wake Sofia gently instead of shelter buzzers at 6 a.m. The apartment was empty when Elena got the keys. Completely empty. No furniture, no dishes, nothing. Just space waiting to be filled. Sofia walked through rooms with reverence, usually reserved for cathedrals, touching walls like they might disappear if she pressed too hard. This is ours? Really ours? Really ours, baby. For as long as we want it. Sofia's face transformed into joy so pure it made Elena's chest physically hurt. Her daughter ran from room to room, bare feet slapping hardwood, voice echoing off empty walls, claiming territory with 7-year-old authority. "This is my room, and this could be the room where Bear sleeps. And this bathroom is fancy." Elena stood in the living room and tried to remember what furniture people owned. What constituted a home beyond walls and keys? She'd been homeless so long that basic domesticity felt foreign. She'd lost the vocabulary for normal life. She called Vera, who'd apparently been waiting for exactly this call and had opinions prepared. First, mattresses. You and Sofia need actual beds, not shelter bunks or hotel beds. Second, table and chairs so you can eat like humans. Third, couch, because watching TV on the floor builds terrible character. Fourth, everything else later, because you're not winning stability awards by overspending on throw pillows. By day 3, the apartment had basic furniture assembled by delivery people. Elena tipped generously because sudden wealth made her nervous about seeming cheap. Sofia's room got a bed, dresser, and bookshelf that Elena filled with books from half-price books. Chapter books Sofia was growing into, and picture books she wasn't quite ready to abandon. Elena's room got a bed and the same sense of disorientation she'd felt since returning from the Philippines. Sleeping in actual bedroom with door that closed felt like cosplaying as stable adult rather than being one. But she did it anyway, because Judge Morrison had said demonstrate stability, and stability apparently required doors and mattresses and the performance of normal life. Day 7. Elena enrolled Sofia in the neighborhood elementary school. Real enrollment, not the temporary, we're hoping to stay long enough for education version she'd done while homeless. The principal, Ms. Rodriguez, stern but fair, reviewed Sofia's transcripts with expression that suggested she'd seen every variation of disrupted education imaginable. Sofia's missed significant instruction time. She's behind in math, barely at grade level in reading. We'll need to assess whether additional support is required. Whatever she needs, tutoring, extra help, whatever gets her caught up, I can pay for it. Ms. Rodriguez's eyebrows rose fractionally. 3 weeks ago, Elena had been listing P.O. Box as address and claiming temporary housing. Now she was offering to pay for tutoring like finances weren't constrained. The transformation probably looked suspicious or miraculous, depending on perspective. "Mrs. Reyes, may I ask what changed? Your circumstances have improved dramatically." Elena had prepared for this question because school administrators talked to social workers who talked to court evaluators who reported back to judges. "I inherited property from my grandmother, agricultural assets that I've been liquidating. My financial situation is stable now." "I see. Well, stability is good for Sofia. Consistency matters more than anything else for children who've experienced disruption. Please maintain this consistency. She needs it." Day 14. Marco exercised his first supervised visitation. The arrangement required neutral third-party supervisor present at all times. Court order protecting against parental alienation claims from either side. Elena dropped Sofia at the visitation center with stomach that twisted into knots she couldn't quite untangle. Sofia looked nervous, clutching her backpack like shield. "Mama, do I have to?" "Yes, baby. Your dad wants to see you, and the court said he should. But it's only 2 hours. I'll be right here when you're done." "Will you really? Or will you have to go somewhere important like before?" The question landed like accusation and fair criticism combined. Elena had left for the Philippines, had disappeared for a week while Sofia waited in hotel rooms and asked when they were going home. Her daughter had learned that sometimes mothers left even when they promised they wouldn't. Elena knelt down, eye level, holding Sofia's small face between her hands. "I will be in the waiting room the entire 2 hours. I promise. If you need me, I'm 30 feet away. Always." Sofia nodded, swallowed nervously, and walked into the visitation room where Marco waited with supervised smile that looked rehearsed. Elena watched through the observation window as Marco hugged Sofia, presented gifts he'd brought. New doll, board game, snacks that violated dinner rules Elena maintained. The supervisor took notes, documenting interaction that would eventually be reported to court evaluators assessing parental fitness. Marco performed fatherhood with the calculation of someone aware he was being watched, attentive, engaged, asking about school and friends and whether Sofia liked her new apartment. Sofia answered with careful politeness that broke Elena's heart. Her daughter had learned to manage adults' emotions, to give answers that prevented conflict, to be smaller than she should have to be. 7 years old and already fluent in a language of familial destruction. After 2 hours, Sofia emerged looking exhausted. Marco followed her out, speaking to Elena with forced civility that barely masked anger underneath. She looks good. The apartment seems nice. You've certainly managed to land on your feet remarkably quickly. I inherited money. Marco, that's not landing on my feet. That's getting help from family you knew nothing about because you never cared about my grandmother. I cared. I just had priorities, gambling, debts. Those are your priorities. Now, if you'll excuse me, Sofia and I have dinner plans. She took her daughter's hand and left before Marco could manufacture additional conversation. In the car, Sofia was quiet, looking out the window with expression too complicated for Elena to decipher. Baby, you okay? Daddy says you took me to the Philippines because you were running away. Elena's hands tightened on the steering wheel. That's not true. I went to handle family business, to see Lola's property, to secure our future. Daddy says you're lying about the money, that you'll lose it soon and we'll be homeless again. Your father is wrong. The money is real, and we're not going to be homeless again, ever. Sofia nodded, but her expression suggested she wanted to believe but couldn't quite manage it. 7-year-old skepticism born from too many broken promises. Elena couldn't blame her, could only demonstrate through time and consistency that this stability was real, was permanent, was worth Sofia's fragile trust. Day 21. Elena received email from Attorney Santos that made her pull over while driving because reading while operating vehicle felt dangerous given the content. Mrs. Reyes, we have encountered significant complication. International Saffron Consortium has filed legal challenge claiming your grandmother Saffron was illegally acquired during original cultivation period. They allege violations of 1980s agricultural export laws and claim the Philippine government should seize the remaining product. This claim is without merit. Your grandmother operated legally and maintained proper documentation. However, defending against this challenge will require legal resources and time. The consortium appears to be manufacturing legal obstacles to force you to sell remaining saffron at discount prices. I recommend we prepare for extended legal battle. The consortium has resources and motivation. They want your saffron, and they're willing to create expensive problems until you become desperate enough to sell at their prices. Current security costs plus legal defense will consume approximately $15,000 monthly. Please advise how you wish to proceed. Attorney Santos. Elena sat in the parked car with Sofia in the back seat, doing homework, and felt familiar panic trying to resurface. Just when things stabilized, new crisis emerged. Just when she could breathe, something tried to drown her again. Mama, why did we stop? Work email, baby. Nothing important. But it was important. The consortium, probably coordinated by pharmaceutical companies who'd lost bidding war when Elena sold to competitors, was doing exactly what Attorney Santos predicted, creating expensive legal problems, forcing Elena to spend money on defense while draining resources until she became desperate enough to sell remaining 8,000 pounds at whatever price they offered. It was sophisticated economic warfare disguised as legal process. And it would work if Elena couldn't afford prolonged legal battle. She called Brennan from the parked car, explaining the Philippines' situation with efficiency that came from too many crises compressed into too little time. His response was immediate and practical. How much is the remaining saffron worth? Approximately 35 to 40 million at international market prices. And the consortium wants you to sell at what price? They haven't made formal offer yet. But based on Attorney Santos' assessment, probably 50 to 60% of market value. 15 to 25 million. So you'd lose 15 million by selling now versus waiting for proper export permits and international sales. Roughly, yes. Brennan was quiet for a moment, calculating something. Mrs. Reyes, I'm going to be blunt. Judge Morrison's evaluation is in 39 days. If you're embroiled in international legal battle, if there's any question about the inheritance's legitimacy, if the consortium successfully challenges your ownership, that looks terrible in custody proceedings. Marco's attorney will use it to argue the wealth is unstable, potentially illegitimate, evidence of complicated circumstances unsuitable for child rearing. So you're saying I should sell at discount to avoid looking complicated. I'm saying you need to weigh $15 million in lost value against risk of losing Sofia's custody. That's a calculation only you can make. Elena sat in silence, watching Sofia practice spelling words in the back seat, small face serious with concentration. The same daughter who'd asked whether they'd have Real House again, who'd learned to manage adults' emotions, who deserved better than mother, who kept gambling on impossible things. $15 million against Sofia's custody. The math was obvious. No amount of money mattered if she lost her daughter. But surrendering to economic pressure, letting consortia manufacture legal problems until she capitulated, that felt like betraying Lola Beatrice's legacy. Her grandmother had protected that Saffron for 35 years, had refused every pressure to sell at bad prices, had believed that patience outlasted market manipulation. Elena made a decision that was probably stupid, but felt necessary. I'm not selling. Tell me what I need to do to fight this. Are you sure? The risk, I'm sure. Lola didn't surrender. Neither will I. She hired Filipino litigation attorney whose name Dr. Cruz provided. Maria Delgado, specialist in agricultural law with reputation for aggressive defense against corporate land grabs and asset challenges. Delgado's retainer was $30,000, with estimated $50,000 additional costs over the next 6 months. Mrs. Reyes, Delgado explained via video call, her English carrying the precision of legal training. The consortium's claim is procedurally weak. They're alleging export violations from 35 years ago without evidence. But weakness of claim doesn't prevent expensive defense. They want to bleed your resources until you settle. How long until this is resolved? 6 months minimum. Possibly 12 if they appeal. Philippine courts move slowly. The consortium knows this. They're counting on you being unable to afford extended litigation. What if I can afford it? Then we file aggressive countersuit for malicious prosecution and tortious interference. Make the legal battle expensive for them too. Force them to commit resources defending baseless claims. Eventually, they'll calculate that continuation costs more than potential gain. Do it. File everything. I want them to understand I'm not backing down. Delgado smiled with expression that suggested she enjoyed combative clients. Excellent. I will begin immediately. But Mrs. Reyes, be prepared for escalation. When they realize economic pressure isn't working, they may attempt alternative approaches. Like what? Anything from media campaigns, questioning legitimacy of your inheritance, to more direct interference with facility security. When corporations want assets and legal methods fail, ethical constraints sometimes become flexible. The warning sat in Elena's stomach like lead. She'd thought securing the property, hiring guards, establishing legal ownership would be sufficient. But apparently protecting wealth required different strategies than acquiring it. Required anticipating threats that came from directions she hadn't considered. Day 28. Patricia, the property manager, called with concern in her voice that suggested something had happened. Mrs. Reyes, we need to talk about your lease. Elena's chest tightened. Is there a problem? Someone contacted our management company, claimed to be conducting background investigation for custody proceedings. Asked about your payment history, lease terms, whether you've had any complaints from neighbors. Asked very specific questions about your financial situation. What did you tell them? Nothing. Tenant privacy is protected. But Mrs. Reyes, this feels invasive. Like someone is building case against you. I wanted you to be aware. Marco, or Marco's attorney, conducting opposition research, gathering ammunition for custody evaluation. Looking for any evidence that sudden wealth was unstable or that Elena's behavior raised concerns. Elena thanked Patricia and immediately called Brennan. His response was resigned familiarity with custody warfare tactics. This is normal. Invasive, but normal. Marco's attorney is doing due diligence. Make sure everything in your life is documented, defensible, above reproach. No questionable spending. No erratic behavior. You're being evaluated constantly. I'm living like none who pays taxes. Good. Keep doing that. Day 35. Sofia came home from school with note from Ms. Rodriguez requesting urgent meeting. Elena's stomach dropped. Urgent meetings from principals never meant good news. She met Ms. Rodriguez the next morning, Sofia in class, while adults discussed whatever crisis had emerged. Ms. Rodriguez pulled out several drawings Sofia had made during art class. They were disturbing in ways that made Elena's chest hurt. One showed a house with a woman and child inside, a man outside reaching toward them. Another depicted an airplane flying away from stick figure crying on the ground. A third showed a large building, possibly the Saffron facility, with purple color bleeding through walls. Mrs. Reyes, Sofia, is processing significant trauma through these drawings. Our counselor is concerned. The imagery suggests anxiety about separation, fear of abandonment, and confusion about her living situation. Elena studied the drawings with growing horror. She hasn't said anything to me about being anxious. Children often don't. They protect parents from their own distress. But art reveals what words can't. I'm recommending Sofia start regular counseling sessions with our school psychologist. She needs support processing the transitions she's experienced. Of course, whatever helps her. Ms. Rodriguez's expression softened slightly. Mrs. Reyes, stability isn't just about money or housing. It's about emotional consistency. Sofia needs to know she's safe, that changes are permanent, that the people she loves aren't going to disappear again. That takes time to establish. Be patient. Elena left the meeting feeling like she'd failed at something fundamental. She'd been so focused on solving external problems, custody battles, legal challenges, financial security, that she'd missed her daughter's internal crisis. Sofia was scared, traumatized, drawing pictures of abandonment while pretending everything was fine. That evening, Elena sat with Sofia on the new couch in their new apartment and tried to address fears she should have noticed earlier. Baby, Ms. Rodriguez showed me your drawings. The ones from art class. Sofia's face closed off immediately. They're just drawings. They look like you're worried about things. About me leaving. About us being separated. I'm not worried. It's okay if you are. A lot has happened. We were homeless. Then we went to the Philippines. Then we came back. And everything changed fast. That's scary. Sofia was quiet for a long moment, small fingers tracing patterns on the couch fabric. Finally, quietly, what if we have to give the apartment back? What if the money goes away and we're homeless again? That's not going to happen. But you don't know that. Daddy says she caught herself. What does Daddy say? He says people like us don't get to keep money like that. That something will go wrong and we'll lose it. That I should be prepared to come live with him when it happens. Elena felt rage burn through her chest so intensely she had to breathe carefully to control it. Marco was poisoning their daughter against their stability, planting fear that Elena's success was temporary, preparing Sofia for custody transfer he still believed was inevitable. Sofia, look at me. Elena waited until her daughter's eyes met hers. Your father is wrong. The money is real. This apartment is ours. We're not losing it. And you're not going to live with him unless that's what you want. I promise. You promised before, when we were in the shelter. You said we'd be okay, and then we had to go to the Philippines, and I didn't know where we were or when we were coming home, and everything was scary. The accusation was fair. Elena had promised stability while having no ability to deliver it. Had made declarations about being okay while living in her car. Had told Sofia not to worry while secretly panicking about everything. You're right. I made promises I couldn't keep because I didn't have control. But baby, things are different now. We have money. We have options. I can actually protect us now. And I will. Every single day. I promise. Sofia looked at her with 7-year-old skepticism that had been earned through experience. Okay, I'll try to believe you. It wasn't wholehearted trust, but it was permission to try proving herself. Elena took it and resolved to be worthy of it. Day 42. Court evaluator visited the apartment for scheduled home assessment. Mrs. Kim was 50-something, professional, moving through rooms with clipboard and practiced that missed nothing. She examined kitchen for evidence of meal preparation, checked Sofia's room for age-appropriate environment, asked questions designed to reveal whether sudden wealth had translated into actual stability. Mrs. Reyes, tell me about your daily routine with Sofia. I wake her at 7 a.m. We have breakfast together, usually cereal or toast, sometimes eggs. She gets ready for school. I drive her, then work from home managing my import business. I pick her up at 3 p.m. We do homework together, have dinner around 6, evening routine, bed by 8:30. Import business? I'm establishing company to manage my grandmother's Saffron assets, applying for export licenses, building relationships with international dealers. It's technically unemployed right now, but it will generate income once permits process. Mrs. Kim made notes. And during the day, while Sofia is at school, you're home alone managing business operations? Yes. Why? Just confirming that you have stable daily structure. That Sofia experiences consistency rather than unpredictable schedule. The subtext was clear. Mrs. Kim was assessing whether Elena was stable, responsible adult or lucky, poor person who'd stumbled into money but hadn't actually changed underlying instability that made her unsuitable for primary custody. Mrs. Kim spent 30 minutes with Sofia, separately, asking questions Elena couldn't hear. When they emerged, Sofia looked tired but okay. Mrs. Kim thanked them both with professional courtesy that revealed nothing about her assessment. After she left, Elena sat on the couch and tried not to spiral into anxiety about what Mrs. Kim had observed, what conclusions she'd drawn, what would be reported to Judge Morrison. Mama, did I do okay? Did I say the right things? The question broke Elena's heart. 7 years old and already worried about performing correct answers for adults evaluating her family. Baby, there are no right things. Just honest things. You told her the truth, right? I told her I like our apartment, that you make dinner every night, that I'm not scared anymore except sometimes. Was that okay? That was perfect. That was honest. The lady asked if I wanted to live with Daddy. I said no. Was that wrong? Elena pulled Sofia close, breathing in the smell of her hair that was school day and children's shampoo and every reason this fight mattered. That wasn't wrong. That was you telling the truth about what you want. And that's the most important thing. Day 55, 5 days before final custody evaluation. Elena received email from Dr. Cruz that made her call him immediately despite Manila being 16 hours ahead. Dr. Cruz, your email said urgent news about the consortium. What happened? His voice carried excitement, poorly contained by professional demeanor. Mrs. Reyes, the consortium withdrew their legal challenge. Completely. Filed notice of dismissal this morning. Maria Delgado's countersuit worked. Made continuation too expensive to justify potential gain. Elena sat down heavily, relief flooding through her like physical substance. So the Saffron is secure? No more legal threats? No more from them. But Mrs. Reyes, there's more. I've been contacted by 3 separate international buyers who learned about your product through industry channels. They're interested in the remaining quantity. Not consortium members, independent dealers from Spain, India, and UAE. What kind of offers? Substantial. The Spanish dealer offered $4,800 per pound for 2,000 pounds, $9. 6 million total. The Indian buyer wants 3,000 pounds at $4,500 per pound, $13. 5 million. The UAE contact is interested in the entire remaining quantity at negotiated bulk price. I estimate $30 to $35 million for full acquisition. The numbers assembled themselves into implications Elena couldn't quite process. That's more than international market rates. Why would they pay premium? Your grandmother's Saffron has unique properties. The frozen preservation maintained chemical composition better than any documented case in industry history. And the provenance, 35-year storage, documented chain of custody, authenticated by me, adds value beyond pure commodity pricing. This is historically significant product. Collectors and specialty dealers will pay premium. How quickly can we execute sales? Spanish dealer can close within 2 weeks. Indian buyer needs 30 days. UAE contact wants to inspect facility first, then negotiate. I recommend accepting the Spanish and Indian offers immediately. That generates $23. $1 million within 30 days while you negotiate bulk sale with UAE buyer for remaining quantity. Elena did calculation automatically. $23. $1 million plus the $4. $5 million already in her account. Total liquid assets of $27. $6 million within 1 month. More money than she could conceptualize. Enough to secure Sofia's future through college and beyond. Enough to never worry about custody courts or medical debt or any financial crisis ever again. Accept both offers. Draft contracts. I want this done before custody evaluation. Understood. Mrs. Reyes, your grandmother will be very proud. She protected this Saffron through market collapse and 35 years of patience. Now her faith is validated. The value is realized. Her legacy continues. Elena's throat closed. She whispered thanks to Dr. Cruz and ended the call before emotion overwhelmed professional composure. Then she sat in her apartment, with lease in her name and furniture she'd bought and stability she'd built, and let herself cry. Not from sadness, from relief, so intense it felt like grief's opposite. From gratitude to a grandmother who'd believed frozen saffron could outlast desperation. From exhaustion after 60 days of constant crisis management. From the particular joy of surviving when survival seemed impossible. Sofia found her crying and immediately panicked. "Mama, what's wrong? Did something bad happen?" "No, baby." Elena pulled her daughter close, tears still flowing. "Something good happened. Something really, really good. We're going to be okay. Actually okay. Forever. Promise? I promise. And this time I can keep it." Day 60. Final custody evaluation. Elena dressed in the most professional clothes she now owned. Actual interview suit purchased from Nordstrom rather than thrift store scrubs. She'd spent 60 days building stability Judge Morrison had demanded. Now came the test of whether stability was sufficient. The courtroom was the same. Judge Morrison was the same. Marco was the same, sitting with Ms. Wilson, an expression that suggested he believed he'd still win despite Elena's transformed circumstances. Mrs. Kim presented her evaluation first, reading from reports she'd prepared with professional detachment that revealed nothing about conclusion until the final paragraph. Based on home visit, interviews with Sofia and both parents, and review of financial documentation, I find that Mrs. Reyes has established stable environment suitable for primary custody. The apartment is appropriate, daily routine is consistent, financial resources are verified and sustainable. Sofia expresses clear preference to remain with her mother and shows no indications of undue influence or parental alienation. She paused, looking up from her report. However, I must note concern about the rapid transformation. Mrs. Reyes went from homeless to millionaire in matter of weeks. While current circumstances appear stable, the sudden nature of this change creates uncertainty about long-term consistency. I recommend continued monitoring and 6-month reevaluation. Judge Morrison made notes. Expression unreadable. "Mr. Reyes, do you contest these findings?" Marco stood, and Elena could see the rage he was barely controlling. "Your Honor, I contest the legitimacy of this entire situation. My ex-wife manufactures fortune from foreign inheritance she never mentioned during our marriage. She disappears to the Philippines with our daughter. She returns with millions and expects this court to accept her sudden wealth as evidence of stability. This is suspicious at best, fraudulent at worst. Ms. Wilson, do you have evidence of fraud?" Marco's attorney stood, her confidence slightly diminished from 60 days ago. Your Honor, we have questions about the inheritance's source and authenticity. We've submitted documentation requests to Philippine authorities, but international legal processes are slow. We believe Mrs. Reyes' finances warrant additional scrutiny before custody determination. Brennan stood before Judge Morrison could respond. Your Honor, Mr. Reyes' attorney is manufacturing delays through baseless fraud allegations. Mrs. Reyes has provided extensive documentation, estate attorney verification, chemical analysis from recognized experts, bank statements showing wire transfers from legitimate buyers, property tax payment receipts. The inheritance is real, verified, and sufficient to provide stable environment for Sofia. Mr. Reyes' suspicion doesn't constitute evidence of wrongdoing. Judge Morrison held up his hand, silencing further argument. I've reviewed all documentation submitted by both parties. I've read Mrs. Kim's evaluation. I've observed both parents during these proceedings. He was quiet for a moment, assembling thoughts into ruling that would determine Sofia's future. This is an unusual case. Mrs. Reyes' financial transformation is dramatic and, frankly, remarkable. But remarkable doesn't mean fraudulent. The documentation is compelling. The stability is demonstrated. And most importantly, Sofia clearly wishes to remain with her mother. He looked at Marco directly. Mr. Reyes, your concerns about sudden wealth are noted. But your own financial decisions created the circumstances that led to homelessness. You depleted joint accounts through gambling debts. You failed to pay mortgage while claiming financial stability. Your actions caused the instability your ex-wife has now remedied through her own resourcefulness. Marco's face flushed. Ms. Wilson touched his arm, warning him to stay silent. Judge Morrison continued. Here's my ruling. Primary custody remains with Mrs. Reyes. Mr. Reyes will have supervised visitation twice monthly until such time as supervision can be safely discontinued. This arrangement will be reviewed in 6 months. If Mrs. Reyes maintains stability, and I emphasize maintains, not just demonstrates temporarily, we'll consider expanded visitation for Mr. Reyes. The gavel fell. Elena felt the sound reverberate through her chest. Victory. Actual victory. 60 days of constant pressure, of building stability while fighting legal challenges, of demonstrating to courts and evaluators and her own daughter that this transformation was real, all of it validated by one judge's ruling. Sofia was waiting outside with Vera, who'd again agreed to supervise during the hearing. Her daughter looked up as Elena emerged, searching her mother's face for indication of outcome. Mama, we won, baby. You're staying with me. Sofia's face transformed. She threw herself at Elena with force that nearly knocked them both over, crying into her mother's shoulder with relief that had clearly been building for weeks. Vera watched with expression that might have been satisfaction, or might have been approval, or might have been both. Told you, Vera said quietly. Told you that determination outlasts circumstances. Marco appeared in the courthouse doorway, flanked by Ms. Wilson. His expression was carefully controlled, but Elena could see the anger burning underneath. He approached with measured steps, speaking with forced civility that barely contained rage. This isn't over, Elena. 6 months. Judge Morrison said 6 months before reevaluation. A lot can happen in 6 months. Your fortune could evaporate. Your stability could collapse. And when it does, I'll be there to pick up the pieces. Elena met his eyes with calm she'd earned through 60 days of crisis. My stability won't collapse because it's built on something real. Not gambling debts or lies or pretending everything's fine while drowning. It's built on family legacy and hard work and actually giving a damn about our daughter's future. That doesn't evaporate, Marco. That's permanent. She took Sofia's hand and walked away, leaving Marco standing in the courthouse entrance with defeated expression of man who'd lost custody battle because he'd never understood what actually mattered. That evening, Elena sat with Sofia on their couch in their apartment and tried to explain what came next. Baby, things are going to change again. But good changes this time. I'm selling the rest of Lola's Saffron. We'll have enough money to buy a house. A real house with a yard and space for you to grow up in. Would you like that? A house with a yard? Where a bear can run around. Exactly. And you can have your own big bedroom. We can paint it whatever color you want. We can make it permanent. Home that can't be taken away. Sofia was quiet for a moment, processing. Mama, is Lola Beatriz watching us? Does she know we're okay now? Elena's throat closed. I think she is, baby. I think she knew this would happen. That's why she protected the Saffron all those years. She was protecting us before we knew we'd need it. And I want to say thank you. Can we do that? How do you want to say it? Sofia thought carefully. Can we make cupcakes? Like the ones in the truck from that story? And we can eat them and think about Lola and say thank you? Elena laughed through tears that kept appearing. Yeah, baby, we can absolutely do that. They spent that evening baking cupcakes in their apartment kitchen. First time Elena had baked anything since nursing school, when stress baking had briefly been hobby before Marco's debts consumed all spare time and resources. The recipe was simple from internet search, nothing compared to Rose Callahan's frozen saffron cultivation facility or Sarah Mitchell's inherited lodge. But they were their cupcakes, made in their kitchen, in their home, together. When the cupcakes were done, Elena and Sofia sat on their couch and ate them while Sofia told stories she remembered from Lola Beatriz's video calls. About the purple field, about the way saffron glowed in harvest light, about Lola promising Sofia would someday see where their family came from. I saw it, Mama. When we went to the Philippines, I saw Lola's field. It was purple even though everything was old and empty. The purple stayed. The purple stayed, Elena echoed, thinking about how some things persist even after everything else crumbles. About legacy colored into cement. About frozen saffron waiting 35 years for someone brave enough to claim it. 3 months later, Elena stood in the yard of a house in Greenwood. 3 bedrooms, updated kitchen, fenced yard where a bear could actually run. The house cost $850,000, which 3 months ago would have seemed like an amount reserved for lottery winners and people whose lives hadn't been destroyed by medical debt. Now it was just her budget, just what she could afford with saffron sales that had eventually totaled $31. $2 million after UAE buyer purchased remaining quantity at premium price. Dr. Cruz negotiated aggressively. Sofia was inside with the inspector, pointing out features she decided were important. Closet big enough for costume collection she was starting, window that faced east for morning light, bathroom with tub deep enough for elaborate bubble bath situations. Elena's phone buzzed. Email from Maria Delgado with subject line that made her smile. Final resolution. Consortium settlement. The message was brief. Mrs. Reyes, Consortium has agreed to pay $250,000 settlement for malicious prosecution and tortious interference. They acknowledge your legitimate ownership and withdraw all challenges permanently. Your grandmother's legacy is secure. Congratulations. $250,000 for the trouble they caused. Elena would donate it, maybe to legal aid organizations helping homeless mothers navigate custody battles. Maybe to agricultural preservation programs in the Philippines. Maybe split between both, because solving problems required addressing them from multiple angles. The inspector emerged with Sofia, both looking pleased. Mrs. Reyes, the house is in excellent condition. Foundation solid, roof new, systems updated. I don't see any reason this wouldn't be ideal for your family. Then we'll take it. Sofia squealed, actually squealed, with joy that echoed across the empty yard. This is ours? Really, really ours? Really, really ours, baby. That evening, after paperwork was initiated and inspection scheduled, and all the bureaucratic machinery of home ownership was grinding forward, Elena sat in her Capitol Hill apartment and wrote email to Dr. Cruz. Dr. Cruz, thank you for everything. Your authentication, your negotiation, your protection of my grandmother's legacy. None of this would have been possible without you. The saffron sales are complete. The legal challenges are resolved. Sofia and I are buying a house. We're building the stable life Lola wanted us to have. I know she asked you to help whoever found the saffron. You kept that promise. You honored her memory by protecting mine and Sofia's future. That matters more than money, more than anything. Thank you for believing in frozen saffron and impossible stories and single mothers who inherit fortunes they don't deserve but need desperately. With gratitude, Elena, his response came within an hour. Manila morning, while Seattle was evening. Mrs. Reyes, your grandmother told me once that saffron teaches patience. That the crocus takes months to bloom, requires precise conditions, gives only 3 stigmas per flower. But those who wait, who provide proper care, who believe in the process, they are rewarded with something precious. She was not speaking only about saffron. You waited. You provided care for your daughter under impossible circumstances. You believed when belief was unreasonable. Now you're rewarded with security you fought to deserve. That is your grandmother's true legacy. Not the saffron itself, but the lesson it teaches about persistence outlasting desperation. Honor her by living well, by teaching Sofia the same persistence, by remembering that frozen things can preserve value if protected properly, with respect and admiration. Dr. Ramon Cruz Elena read it 3 times, feeling the particular weight of wisdom delivered by someone who understood that agricultural metaphors sometimes contain whole philosophies about surviving. 6 months after Judge Morrison's ruling, the reevaluation hearing was brief. Elena presented documentation showing continued stability. House ownership, established import business, now generating sustainable income. Sofia's improved school performance, consistent routine maintained throughout the evaluation period. Mrs. Kim's second assessment was unequivocal. Mrs. Reyes has demonstrated that her initial transformation was not temporary windfall, but sustainable stability. Sofia is thriving academically and emotionally. Home environment is appropriate. I recommend continuing primary custody with Mrs. Reyes and reducing supervision requirements for Mr. Reyes' visitation. Judge Morrison's ruling took less than 5 minutes. Primary custody remains with Mrs. Reyes. Mr. Reyes' visitation will continue twice monthly, supervision discontinued. This arrangement will remain in place until such time as either party petitions for modification with substantial evidence justifying change. It was done, actually done. No more evaluations. No more supervised visits proving Marco wasn't dangerous. No more court appearances demonstrating stability. Just regular custody arrangement between divorced parents where one parent had won and the other had lost, and the court wasn't interested in revisiting unless something dramatic changed. Marco didn't even contest it. Signed the paperwork with resigned acceptance of man who'd gambled everything and lost. His attorney looked almost relieved. Ms. Wilson had probably been advising him for months to accept reality rather than keep fighting battles he couldn't win. Outside the courthouse, Sofia asked the question she'd been holding back. Mama, does this mean Daddy can't take me away anymore? This means you stay with me unless you decide otherwise. And that won't happen. We're permanent now. Forever permanent. Forever permanent. Sofia nodded with satisfaction. Good, because I like our house, and I don't want to move again. That evening, in their house in Greenwood with the fenced yard and the morning light and the permanence that Sofia had learned to trust, Elena pulled out the box she'd brought back from Anda. The box containing Rose's photograph, Rebecca's journal, and the rubber chicken named Gerald that Bear had claimed as personal property. She'd started a tradition. Every April 14th, Lola Beatrice's birthday, they made lemon burst cupcakes from recipe Dr. Cruz had provided. They ate them while looking at Lola's photograph and telling stories about purple fields and frozen saffron and the particular grace of grandmothers who protected futures they'd never see. This year, Sofia added her own contribution. Mama, can we plant crocuses in our yard? So we have our own purple flowers? Not for saffron, just because they're beautiful and they remind us of Lola. That's a perfect idea, baby. They planted crocus bulbs together in the spring garden. 50 of them in pattern Sofia, designed with 7-year-old artistic vision that prioritized color distribution over practical spacing. The bulbs would bloom in fall if conditions were right, would produce purple flowers that wouldn't be harvested, wouldn't be preserved, would just exist as beauty for its own sake. That night, After Sofia was asleep in her bedroom with Bear guarding the hallway and the house settling into evening quiet, Elena sat at her kitchen table and wrote one final letter. Not email. Actual letter on actual paper to be sent to actual address. Dear Lola Beatriz, I never thank you properly. Never got to tell you what your saffron meant. What your faith in frozen preservation accomplished. You saved us. Sofia and me. You saved us when we were drowning and didn't even know help was coming. You protected that saffron through market collapse and 35 years of patience and everyone telling you to sell, to give up, to accept that preservation was futile. But you didn't sell. You didn't give up. You believed that someday someone would need what you'd protected. And you were right. I'm raising Sofia in a house we own. She's thriving in school. We have stability that seemed impossible 6 months ago. And it's all because you refused to surrender when surrender was reasonable. Thank you for teaching me about persistence, about protecting value even when markets collapse, about believing that frozen things can preserve what matters if you're willing to wait. Sofia asks about you, wants to know what you were like. I tell her you were patient and strong and believed in impossible things. I tell her those qualities run in our family, that they're part of her inheritance too, not just the money, but the lesson about surviving. Thank you, Lola. Thank you for protecting us before you knew we'd exist. Thank you for teaching me that frozen doesn't mean dead, just preserved, waiting for conditions to allow blooming. We're blooming now, finally, and it's because you planted seeds we didn't know existed. With love and gratitude, Elena and Sofia, she sealed the letter in an envelope, wrote for Lola Beatriz across the front, and placed it in the box with the photograph and the memories and all the evidence that sometimes impossible things happened if you were desperate enough to believe in them. The crocus bulbs would bloom and fall. The house would settle into permanent home instead of just residence. Sofia would grow up with stability Elena had never had. And frozen saffron would exist in family stories as the miracle that saved them when salvation seemed impossible. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes it was everything. Sometimes frozen things preserved exactly what needed preserving until the moment arrived when preservation could transform into life. Outside, Seattle rain fell softly. Inside, the house breathed steady. And somewhere in the walls, Lola Beatriz's legacy settled into foundation. Permanent, protected, waiting patiently to teach whoever came next that persistence outlasted desperation if you believed in preservation. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.